Hi everyone, so here we have an example where you are asked to find where theta lies, which quadrant, but all you're given are a couple of trig bits of information. Now sometimes it's hard for students to read this problem and know how to approach it and actually work the problem, so I wanted to work a few examples. Before we work this first one, I want to go back over a couple of our little memory peg that we'll use. Okay, and it looks like this. Okay, this represents the 4 quadrants of the unit circle. Okay, let's see, and we use our little memory peg. And this stands for all students take calculus. Okay, the quadrants are, this is quadrant 1, and they like to write it in Roman numerals. This is 2, 3, and 4. Okay. In this case, this chart is great and very helpful when we're working with trig. This chart tells us in which quadrants the trig functions are positive. Okay? So for the first one, quadrant 1, the A stands for all. That means every trig function has a positive value. So depending on what angle it is, any angle that actually has the terminal side in quadrant 1, and if you took the trig value of it, it would be positive. Okay? That's easy. Okay, the S right here in quadrant 2, the S represents, I'll write it right here, sine, and it's reciprocal, which would be sine and cosecant. Okay, this means that sine and cosecant are the only two trig functions that are positive in quadrant 2. All the others are negative. Okay, the T in quadrant 3 stands for tangent, and its reciprocal cotangent. And then quadrant 4, the C stands for cosine, and its reciprocal, which is secant. Okay? Once again, this tells you where they're positive. Okay, so now let's go and let's work our example. We'll use this to help us solve our example problems. Okay, for the first one, let theta be an angle, in standard position. Name the quadrant in which theta lies. Now, the quadrant, that means where the terminal side of the angle would lie. Okay. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to use our little chart. All students take calculus. All right. Now, for the first information they gave us, they're telling us that the sign is greater than 0. Remember, for anything to be greater than 0, that's the same thing as saying it's positive. Okay. So you just come down here and say, where is the sign positive? Okay, well, we know it's positive in quadrant 1 because everything's positive in quadrant 1. And then quadrant 2 because the S stands for sine. Okay, so those are the 2 quadrants in which sine of whatever this theta is positive. Now let's go to the second part. The cosine is positive. Once again, it's greater than 0. So where's the cosine positive? All right, so we come down again. Cosine is positive in quadrant 1, right, because that's all. In quadrant 4. Okay, so I've checked both of them. They want to know, theta has to satisfy both of these situations. So obviously, the one with the 2 check marks is the quadrant where theta has to lie. So the answer for this one would be quadrant 1, right there. Okay, now let's look at the second example. Same thing. We're going to use our all students take calculus. All right, and let's see what we have. We have tangent is greater than 0. Remember, that represents positive. Okay, so we know where is tangent positive. Well, we know it's positive right there with the T, and we know it's positive in quadrant 1. Okay, that's the first one. Cosecant is greater than 0. This is positive also. Okay, so the cosecant, where's the cosecant? Remember, cosecant and sine go together. So cosecant and sine. So it is positive. Everything's positive in quadrant 1. And then, let's see, cosecant and sine go together, so that would be positive in quadrant 2. All right, so once again, the only quadrant that satisfies both is quadrant 1. So this one's quadrant 1 also. Now let's look at one more example working the same way. Let theta be an angle in standard position. Name the quadrant in which theta lies. So first, secant is less than 0. Less than 0, that's the same thing as saying it's negative. All right, so let's come over here. All students take calculus. Let's ask ourselves, where is the secant of theta negative? Because remember, with the unit circle, 2 of the quadrants are positive and 2 of the quadrants are negative. So this little chart tells us where it's positive. So let's ask ourselves, where is the secant positive, right? And since we want negative, we'll check the other 2 quadrants. So for secant, remember secant and cosine are reciprocals of each other. So where is secant and cosine negative? Secant and cosine are positive in the first and the fourth, right? You have the all right there and the cosine. Therefore, it's negative in the other 2. All right, now let's do the second one. For tangent, where is tangent? Once again, less than 0, so we're looking for a negative number. Okay, tangent is negative. We know tangent's positive in the first and the third, therefore it's negative the second and fourth. So my answer, the one that has both checks, is in quadrant 2, so my answer is quadrant 2.